Tension in the Middle East over the Gulf of Aqaba blockade develops into full-scale war, with reports of heavy fighting.
The Middle East is cursed with war, not because of its oil or the global conflict with the Western powers. There are important factors, but they're not the root cause. It's all about the conflict between the Middle Easterners themselves. Arabs versus Jews, Turks versus Kurds, Shias versus Sunnis, the list goes on. This much hatred and disagreement lying within these wrongfully drawn borders has resulted in an always running conflict in the region. And it all began with the decisions that the superpowers made at the end of the First World War. The decision to take the Ottoman Empire, cut it in pieces, and give birth to these countries. These lines, these borders, are the reason behind the 100-year-old chaos that has been going on in the Middle East. I'm going to explain how two gentlemen, one British and one French, hand-drew these lines, opened Pandora's box, and created the modern Middle East. This is why the Middle East is always at war. It's 1914. Britain, France, and Russia are teamed up and ready to fight against Germany, an ambitious rival that wants to be the new godfather of Europe. The tensions were so high that only a single spark was enough to start a big blast and destroy everything. On June 28, 1914, the long-awaited spark came out of a Serbian nationalist's gun. The Archduke of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Serbia, and the Great War was started. While Europe was busy resolving its family issues, this was the Middle East. As you can see, most of this region is the territory of the Ottoman Empire. Oh, the Ottomans, the powerful Muslims who expanded their territory to the gates of Vienna. But no, that's not the Ottomans we're talking about. That was the 16th century Ottomans. Now in the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was a struggling empire that had lost a giant part of its territory, was suffering from political instability, and was left behind in the modernization boom of Europe. So much so that it was famous as the sick man of Europe. When the war broke out, Germany signed a secret agreement with the Ottomans to keep them neutral. But after 4 months, the Ottomans themselves entered the war supporting Germany. Fast forward to late 1915. The war was wearing everyone down. The war that was expected to be over in a couple of months has taken almost 2 years, and still had 2 more years to go. The catastrophic war had crushed the already struggling Ottomans. A lot of politicians could predict that the war would finish their job and that the Ottoman Empire would fall after losing the war. And with the fall of the Ottomans, there would be a lot of lands to colonize. And whenever there's a land to colonize, Britain's there to call shotgun. But it was not that easy. This part of the world was important to almost everyone. France, Russia, Italy, and many other minorities all wanted a piece of the cake. So while the war was still going on, these superpowers started deciding on the fate of the Middle East, and the quest for getting the most out of this part of the world began. The Ottoman Empire was a diverse place. The thing that connected its people was not their nationality or their race. It was mostly the politics and the religion. And because of that, there wasn't a single race or a single nation there. You could see all types of different ethnicities there. Turks, Kurds, Arabs, Jews, Armenians, Assyrians, and so on. The majority of the non-Turkish citizens of the Ottoman territory were Arabs. Arabs were the native people of the Arabian Peninsula, and throughout history, they have also settled in the northern regions like modern-day Iraq and Syria. They'd been living in these lands long before the Ottomans' arrival. In 1916, when the Europeans started planning to carve up the Ottoman Empire, the British started some side deals with the Arab leaders. Britain was fighting in Europe and was not in a position to worry about the Ottomans too. They knew that sooner or later the Ottoman Empire would fall. So, as a little booster, they started paying off the Arabs to rebel against the Ottomans and make a civil war in the Ottoman Empire. That way, the Ottomans would become busy with their own domestic problems and wouldn't participate in the war that much. So the British started negotiating with the Arabs. They needed a well-known leader who could influence all the Arabs in the region. Back in the day, one of the most influential positions there was the Sharif of Mecca. These regions were ruled by different tribal leaders, and the Sharif of Mecca was something like a boss of bosses. In 1916, when our story is happening, the Sharif of Mecca was this guy, Hussein bin Ali. So the British got in contact with him and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. The deal was simple. You gather all the Arabs and rebel against the Ottoman Empire, and in return, when the war ends and the Ottoman Empire falls, we will create a big Arabian country and make you the king of it. Britain was offering the whole Arab regions of the Ottoman Empire, not just the Arabian Peninsula. A unified Arab country from Syria to Yemen. The offer was so tempting that Hussein accepted it without any hesitation, and the Arab revolt of 1916 started. We know for a fact that the Ottoman Empire did fall after the war, but the unified Arab country that the British promised Hussein doesn't exist now and has never existed. Why? It's pretty simple. The British just lied to the Arabs about the whole thing. While that Hussein guy was promised the Arab lands, the British were secretly negotiating with the French over these lands. Okay, it's time to meet one of the main characters of the story. This is Sir Mark Sykes. This guy can be credited as one of the two architects of the modern Middle East. Sykes was an English politician from a noble family. Among the British politicians, he was known as the guy who knew a lot about the Ottoman Empire. But in reality, he did not know that much. He had been to the Ottoman territory a couple of times and was involved in the Arab revolt negotiations. However, his knowledge of the Ottoman Empire was so poor that he assumed that all of the people in this region were Arabs, and they were all the same. Guess what, Syke? They're not. Not only there are a lot of non-Arab people in those regions, but even the Arabs themselves, they're not the same. They're from different tribes, they're from different ethnicities, and most importantly, they're from different religions. On the surface level, all of them are Muslim, but they follow different branches of Islam. Just like with the Christianity. There are Catholics, there are Protestants, there are Orthodox people, there are Mormons, there are a lot of other people who follow different branches of Christianity. Just like that, there are different branches of Islam that these people follow. There are Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Wahhabi Muslims, and a lot more. And they all have problems with each other, they don't get along. So they're not the same people. Sykes clearly didn't have any clue about what was going on in there. But compared to the other Englishmen who knew absolutely nothing about the Middle East, this guy knew a lot. And because of that, he was trusted as the Middle East expert. So when the British started planning for the future of the Ottoman Empire, Sykes was assigned to do the job. But Britain was not in a position to take the whole region to itself. Its allies, Russia and France, wanted to share too. Russia wasn't involved that much in the process because they were busy with the chaos that led to the Communist Revolution of 1917. They just said, guys, we're just too busy to interfere in this stuff. Just don't forget about our share, okay? We need some of these lands that are close to our borders, and that's all. You can take the rest. The French, on the other hand, were not that passive. They had big plans for these regions, which is the modern-day Syria and Lebanon. The French were like, we had conquered these lands in the Crusades, so they're practically ours. Moreover, the French had spent a gigantic amount of money to provide this region with resources like electricity, education, and other stuff. So they were not gonna back off that easily. So when Sykes was told to decide on the future of the Ottoman Empire, a French diplomat joined him to ensure that the interests of the France were considered too. This French guy was François-Georges Picot. Just like Sykes in Britain, he was known as the Middle East expert in France. On November 23, 1915, Sykes and Picot started negotiations, and a couple of months later, they signed an agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the infamous agreement that is the root cause of all the instability in the Middle East. So let's see what was it about. During the negotiations, Sykes and Picot sat down and put the map of the Ottoman Empire on the table, and then started drawing lines on it. Lines that showed which territories would belong to whom. France already had claims over this region, which is the modern-day Lebanon and Syria. On the other hand, Britain had control over Egypt and the Suez Canal, so it wanted the regions close to it so it could protect the Suez Canal. Long story short, they drew a line from here to here, and divided the Ottoman Empire into Zone A and Zone B. The French got Zone A, which is modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and some parts of Turkey. The British, on the other hand, got Zone B, which is modern-day Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait. This area, which is the eastern part of the modern-day Turkey, was given to Russians as they were promised before. Apart from these zones, this region, which is now Saudi Arabia, was left to the Arabs. The fun fact is that neither the British nor the French wanted this part of the land. They were like, this is just a desert, why should we bother keeping it? It's not like it has oil or something. Anyway, the other region that neither the Britain nor the France got their hands on was this land, the Palestine region. Unlike Arabia, Palestine was wanted by both the French and the British. They wanted this holy land for both religious and geopolitical reasons, so they couldn't agree on it. They said this region will be an internationally run protectorate. So what is an internationally run protectorate? Nobody knows. The truth is that they were just too busy with the other regions and they couldn't agree on this one. So they said, let's decide on this little land after the war. I mean, what could go wrong? Well, everything went wrong. One year before the end of the war, the 1917 Communist Revolution happened in Russia. The revolutionary government was anti-imperialist, so they backed out of all the colonial deals that the Imperial Russia had, including the Sykes-Picot Agreement. But they didn't stop there. They revealed the details of the deal to the public. Remember, this whole agreement was a secret deal. That Hussein guy who had started the Arab revolt did not know anything about it. They were doing these negotiations behind his back. When the details of the agreement were revealed, the Arabs felt betrayed. Their big Arabian kingdom, which was supposed to be like this, was now shrunk to this. Hussein was pissed, so the tensions between him and the British rose. But the British were not his main problem. The Arabian Peninsula included two main regions, Hejaz and Najd. Hussein was the leader of Hejaz, and Najd was led by this guy, Ibn Saud. These two regions had a long-standing rivalry. Ibn Saud and Hussein were arch-enemies. Their conflict wasn't just political or tribal, it was also religious. Hussein was a Sunni Muslim, while Ibn Saud followed Wahhabism, a stricter form of Islam. While Hussein was out fighting the Ottomans and working with the British, Ibn Saud stayed mostly out of the war. He didn't take sides and focused on strengthening his position at home. Later, when it became clear that the British had tricked Hussein, other tribal leaders started to see him as a weak, naive old man who had handed their lands to foreign powers. That's when Ibn Saud made his move. He reached out to more tribes and built new alliances, and he quietly expanded his control across the Arabian Peninsula. That shift in momentum would later lead to Ibn Saud taking over Hejaz and eventually uniting the entire region under the name of Saudi Arabia. Just like the Sykes-Picot Agreement said, these lands were given to Arabs, but different Arabs. Europeans didn't care that much about the technicality though. They were busy with the colonizable lands. When the war was over, the beta version of the UN was established. It was called the League of Nations, and its purpose was to spread peace and prevent wars. One of the first decisions that the League of Nations made was creating mandates. Mandates were the states that were left unsupervised after the fall of an empire. So an ally power comes and takes over them and governs them until they were ready to be independent. Based on that, the French mandates of Syria and Lebanon and the British mandates of Iraq, Jordan and Palestine were created. Hey, look at that! It looks exactly like the Sykes-Picot division map. What a coincidence! The mandate system kept going until the World War II happened. Since the ruins and the casualties of World War II had crushed Britain and France, they couldn't afford to keep these mandates. So they moved out of the regions and the mandates became countries. The countries that were all created wrong. The Sykes-Picot Agreement had a lot of stuff wrong with it. The most obvious fact was that these lines were drawn according to the interests of the British and the French, without considering the factors of ethnicity or language or religion. They just drew some lines and made up different regions without thinking that the people living in those regions have problems with each other. They're not the same people. For instance, in Iraq, Syria and Lebanon, they put Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims in the same country. These people don't get along. They also separated the people who wanted to be together. People like Arabs or Kurds who wanted to have one unified country were scattered in the region instead of being in one location. Sykes-Picot Agreement did not predict some of the future events, like the formation of Turkey or Arab nationalism. Most importantly, Sykes and Picot did not consider the Jewish people in Palestine. And then, when the Balfour Declaration led to other Jewish people migrating to Jerusalem with the support of the big superpowers, a century-long conflict started in the region. The Arabs were saying, "We've been here for centuries, this is our land." And the Jewish people were saying, "No, we were here before you were here, this is our land." The conversation that did not have an end then, and does not have an end now. And when Israel was officially declared as a country after the World War II, the conflicts became bigger and bigger and bigger. The modern Middle East is the result of ridiculously drawn maps that had no use other than creating an always running war zone in the region. And with that much of instability, dictators and terrorist groups find a place to be born. And when you add other factors like oil money and fundamental problems with the West, you'll end up with this chaos that had been going on in the Middle East for years. The Sykes-Picot Agreement plays a very crucial role in creating the modern Middle East, but it's not the only factor. It's not like I'm saying that the Middle East is a violent place just because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. There are zillions of other reasons for that. But the Sykes-Picot Agreement created the room for other problems to emerge. It was the root cause that led to the other causes to create the chaos that had been going on in the Middle East. Also, for the sake of keeping it as a YouTube video, I just simplified a lot of stuff, a lot of details into it that I didn't mention. But if you're curious enough and you want to know more about it, you can check out the sources in the description. Thank you for watching.